So, for our 30th episode, we decided on here on Beyond the Signs podcast is to give you a little behind the scenes of what's beyond the signs. And we wouldn't have been able to do it without you guys.
Truly.
And for the most part, we wanted to take this moment to, one, appreciate and thank you guys. And the other thing is that we wanted to give you a little bit of like how like this podcast became to be. I know in the first episode we talked about how we
came up with
the idea.
Yeah.
But this is more or less like the journey of us actually filming, to the editing, to the posting, to everything that just is what Beyond the Signs has become to be at the moment. And yeah, let's jump right into it. So I want to take it back to when we started this in December, right? We didn't start posting until January. And the reason being is that when we first discussed it, I was like, oh, we got to film in bulk, right? And the reason why we decided to do in bulk is that we have busy schedules throughout like our lives, right?
We also live very far away from each other.
Exactly. So like, for example, like we would have to drive an hour plus to get to each other so we can actually film. And it just, there was a lot that goes into making this. And one is location. So at the time, there was a studio that we used to film at, and like you can clearly see that like we've been in like different spots each time. So like the first couple of episodes were in a studio space, the next couple were in your house, and then this would be the third one where we're in at your house, right?
Again, yeah, just a different one.
Just a different one, right? So it was basically like what I want to say about like the different location. The reasons why they happened was mainly one is that I was leaving that studio space that we had prior to this, and it's interesting because like I did like that studio space a lot. It's just it was way too cramped. Although in the videos they don't look cramped.
It's exactly what I was gonna say. That would have been my first and honestly only complaint. The only thing that could have made it better is if we just had a little more space.
Yeah,
it was very cramped.
Like I don't know if you noticed, but like whenever you look at like the episodes with Kiera, what was actually behind her directly was just a window that we covered with like a black curtain, and that's how that gave it the sort of like feel that it was like just emptiness, like there was still more room to it, but there wasn't. And if you looked at my angle, at some points you actually saw the piece of paper.
Yes, you saw the edge of the backdrop.
And not only that, you saw the door that was right there.
Yes, the door entering into the studio. Yeah, it was a very small room, and it had other like furniture pieces and other pieces of equipment stuffed in that room as well.
Yeah,
so it wasn't just our stuff.
Yeah, and we couldn't like really like set it up in a way where it's like permanent, which I still like would like to do. And like we'll get to this location. It's not really permanent how we set up things, and but like that's where I wanted to eventually get to, is like have that place to be a permanent location, so we don't have to like keep moving things around and like messing up with the angles and sort of like how we sit and everything.
Yeah, because one thing that I noticed is when we came to this house and started recording here is that the angles, we hadn't figured out what the best angles were for this environment yet, because we'd had to adjust so much to the first two. By the time we got to the third location, we just kind of set it up and started filming. And as we kept, filming more and more, we started realizing that, oh, maybe this camera angle should be lifted up higher. Maybe the lighting should be pushed back a little bit. It's a little too harsh, like whatever it may be.
Right. So that's like the main thing that for us when it came to location wise was sort of like how the cameras and the equipment would be set up. The other thing too was that in the first location, we were like, there were other people there. So one, we would have to schedule around like them not being there. And two, when it was them being there, we had to make sure that everyone was silent and not like causing any like commotions. But to be honest, like the greatest blessing of this whole podcast was these mics, to be honest.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing about
yes.
about like filming this, is that I got to learn more about audio that I didn't know as much as I did when it came to like filming wise. So like if you notice, like the first couple of episodes we sound like it doesn't sound bad, right?
Yeah, it doesn't sound bad at all.
And like as we're going by with it, like it's still like a adjustment. Like certain things will like be like, it's not going to be perfect, but like we're getting better at it, right? And I feel like that's sort of like a learning curve that we've been working on with the podcast, is how to really like focus on the audio aspect of it more than the video. And honestly too, video as well. Like
video as well, for sure. I mean, I feel like you've been more, your focus has, that's why I think you said that. Your focus has been more towards the audio. My focus has shifted into becoming more into the video side of things.
Right, which you've taken a lot of responsibility with that after. Like the other thing too is that a lot of the reasons why like the episodes weren't like coming out as frequently as they are now is because like the responsibility was, it was at first it was just me alone doing the video edit.
Because
right?
I didn't know how to at the moment, and the only way that we could make this work was to just jump right into it. And because I didn't know at the time, you were just like, okay, like we don't have the time necessarily right now, because all the time that we have spent together has to be spent just filming and filming.
Exactly.
And filming.
And that's the whole mentality behind it, is like we just need to keep filming so we can keep it at a consistent rate that we can keep like producing these episodes, right? And not only that, like the other thing too is that I was planning on going into surgery back in February. So with us filming in December, we had to already like figure out like, all right, if I'm going to be out for 3 months and like for the formidable future, we would already have to, if like we post every once a week, twice, that means for each month it would be 8 videos, and for 3 months it would be 24 episodes. And we did have plans for that. And then what we did plan out for was to actually get at least maybe like a month of it, and if we needed to film, we could. The unfortunate part is that while I was trying to get ready for going into surgery, I lost a lot of the episodes that we already filmed. So
it was multiple things though, because it was like a snowball effect. It was like, so you were moving out of the studio space that you were affiliated with at the time, right? So you're moving all of your equipment out of there. We filmed the last bulk film string of episodes that we were going to film in that studio space. I think it was like 3 of them got lost, something like that.
No, it was more than that.
I only remember 3.
I think there were a little bit more.
Interesting.
I think we only were capable of finding your 3 angles.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that was one thing that hindered us from being able to accomplish that goal. The second thing was that right before you went into surgery, it was February, so it was snowing.
Yeah.
So we had plans to film with multiple guests. We only ended up being able to film with 1 guest, and then we filmed in bulk once. Right before you went into surgery. So it was very rushed, and it was very like, we don't even have time for 2 guests because the snow is going to limit us in being able to travel to wherever we need to go. So it's now or never. And we did what we could in that moment, but we couldn't do anything after that because then you were out for...
Right. And it's funny because around the time when I was in surgery, that's like not surgery and recovery, that's where like I got the most discouraged to do anything because of what I was going through. A couple of things, which 1, I'm trying to recover. 2, I'm also in the like trying to deal with clients who like have been saying like, oh, like how could you go to surgery when you have to do my work? I'm like, dude, like I'm in surgery. Like I already said that I was gonna do it, and like I already promised. So like
That's just bizarre.
I already scheduled it out that I'm able to go to surgery and afterwards, but like, I guess people have their own thing that they go with, you know?
People just care about getting what they paid for. And while I understand that, you have to remember you're also dealing with another human. Right. And so like in that process, while I wanted to, of course, keep our consistency going and keep the snowball effect going of the growth that we were accumulating at that time, I knew that your health was more important and that once you got this done, we would be able to thrive after that.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I saw the bigger picture.
Right. And then that's when like we took our 3-month hiatus, right? Necessarily you kept still posting on Instagram and stuff. So
every
that,
now and then there wasn't too much to post after a certain period of time.
Right. And which like does hinder the growth a lot, right? But then once we like came here, which was our actual start, like I really can't remember when we actually like restarted filming. Was it in June?
Well, I know that I moved in here in May, like mid to late May. And so, yeah, it had to have been June at that point.
Right. Because I remember like we filmed like a bulk of like 5 episodes. And then we like...
When we first started, I feel like we filmed a bulk of like, we were up like 10 plus episodes.
Right. Ahead. But I remember there was a moment where, because it was actually also too, like we had a discussion because like, honestly, like what I like about this is like our transparency. There was a moment where like, I wasn't doing a lot of the work, right? Because one, I was still feeling discouraged, and two, like I was going through like just not mental stuff, but like it's more or less like personal stuff that like it kept my mind like still like working. So it's not like it wasn't that I didn't believe in this. It was more or less like I didn't have time for it because of like I was working through other stuff that for me like this was more of a side project than an actual like main thing. Mm-hmm. But then that's when we had our discussion, and then you're like, you know what, I gotta step up the game, right? And then that, because at that point you actually took on a lot of the editing too, which helped me a lot to work with and be able to like actually like focus on like, okay, once you've edited the cuts, me to take it in, put it together, fix the color, fix the audio, make sure that we add in our like little like clips here and there. And that's where like we started like experimenting with like different things that like worked and stuff, which freed up a lot more things for me in the sense where like now I can focus on doing the shorts. Right. Which is, I think, one of the main reasons why we grew in the past like 3 weeks.
So I think that, so within this original discussion, right, included the fact that I had just felt like communication was a little off in that, you know, like you said, there was a lot of personal stuff going on that I didn't know about. So on my end, I was like, why isn't this, like, why aren't, you know, where's the transparency? Like, I feel like I'm being told one thing and then nothing's happening or whatever. And then once you explained to me, I was like, oh, of course, like that stuff comes first. Like we need to prioritize what we need to prioritize in order to make this actually work. Because if we're just like saying we can do something when we actually can't, and we're not able to because of other things that are hindering our focus or just our plain ability to get it done, like there needs to be communication there. And once we had that communication and broke down that barrier, we were able to be like, okay, let's kind of like wipe the slate clean and start fresh and dictate out, or like at least like clarify our individual responsibilities, right? And that's where it came in with the editing for me, because my intention was never to always have one person just doing the editing. Mm-hmm. My intention was always to like be able to take on more of a significant role in the responsibilities of this podcast. Because in the beginning it was like you had all the equipment, I was chipping in for the equipment that was gonna be mine, like my mic and things like that, but you had all the cameras, we were getting the tripods, you're getting the lights, like you're setting everything up at the beginning, because I have no idea how to do that, which is crazy that I do now, because it really just shows the evolution of like us working together.
Absolutely. And
in that, like over time, I've been able to, you know, you're better at doing certain things than I am. And then in turn, like, I've been able to develop my own editing style and become really like comfortable with using Premiere Pro.
Which I have to say, to be honest, like, I like your cuts a lot better than mine. I'll be honest. Like, if you guys like watch the first, like, I think I want to say 13 or 15 episodes versus what we come now, like, you could tell there's a dramatic change, and that's all thanks to you. And then, like, you could tell there's sweet. Like the 1 or 2 episodes where like
in between,
something went wrong, and you're like, yeah, that's definitely Omar. He edited that. But
not that I disliked yours. It's just we each have our like styles.
Right. I'm more of like also to like understanding the equipment that we have, because I didn't know how to work any audio stuff. Right. Mm-hmm. I just thought like, hey, we press the recorder and record, right? But then I realized that the recorder that we got was a multi-track, so it can actually split the audios. And that like kind of changed the game.
It changed the entire game.
Because instead of listening to the whole audio and seeing where we could cut, I look at the thing, I look at like who's talking at what certain point, cut it between there, and then just try to like mix in the cuts from there, rather than like, for example, like what it would take for example, an episode for us, it's like 25 to 30 minutes on average. So I would actually have to listen for like 40 minutes.
You'd have to listen to the entire thing over and over and over.
Versus the when we did that, all we had to do was listen to the parts where like the changes are, and like change that. And then if like one of us is talking for a long time, just cut in between and stuff. And
we weren't able to do the multi-tracking until we got to this location, to this
right, because
setup.
I didn't realize that we could do multi-tracking.
Right. And the fact that you can see the different audio tracks, so like you have my audio track and then his below mine, and you can see when I stop talking is when he starts talking. And so I can just know to make that cut wherever there's the difference, and I make all the cuts first, and then as you taught me, and then go back and create what angles are going with what cuts next.
Absolutely.
And it just cut the editing time in half, and it made it so much easier for us to not only record in bulk, but produce and edit in bulk.
Yeah, so it's a number of things, right, that goes into this podcast. And like, that's the thing that I wanted to also like reiterate too, is that when people see the final product, they just think it's just a camera and like a mic, and there's a lot that goes into it. And I feel like what made this process the easiest is that the fact that we love to talk about like our craft and our like own opinions about things that we formulate, you know? And like, I feel like that's where like, for me, like it's my like little like therapy session to have everything just out there and just talk. So that way, like when I'm back home and stuff, like I don't got much to say, because I've already said everything that I had to say on here, right?
Truly.
But also like the future that I see like us going into is just keep on pushing like the boundaries of where we can like actually keep on going with this, right? And like not only that, like let's just say like we didn't even have these cameras, we didn't have like these mics, like I would still try to figure out a way to make this work, because like as of now, like before, it is discouraging when you don't see any views, you don't see anything. So it's like, all right, like it's not working. It's not until you actually put the effort, you won't see it right away, but you'll see it later on. And that's where like I felt like that's when we both put in effort and like actually truly believed in it and pushed onto it. That's when we saw the growth, right? And it's tremendous where we grew from, like where we started from and where we are now. And I can say like what made it really, really work for us is not only just our positive attitude, but also our consistency rate.
I was going to say the consistency does everything for your growth as you keep moving forward. Because if we weren't consistent, like we had that like one short hiatus, right? If we didn't come back afterwards and say, okay, now we got to go full force, like we did. Mm-hmm. We did exactly that. We came back after you had recovered from your surgery, after all was well, we were both healthy and on our way to a healthier life. Like, we both sat down and we're like, okay, now we really got to say that we're going to commit to this.
Absolutely.
And see where it leads us. And the consistency is the most drudging part of it. It's the part that you have to like, kind of like, you just have to keep going through it. Even if you don't see the numbers, even if you don't see the results that you think are going to come by this video or by this milestone, you think you're going to hit this thing. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't matter. You just have to keep posting. And that's what we did. We just kept posting. And then it just hits a certain point where YouTube, I guess, is just like, oh, okay, we see you now. We're going to shine a little bit of light on your platform.
Think for the YouTube part, I honestly think it's when like we started posting shorts.
Yeah. I think it's two things. I think it's the shorts, and to be completely honest with you, I know it sounds simple, but the thumbnails. That for was
sure.
Huge, because forever,
for sure, yeah.
Every single video,
it was just a black
screen with the text of the title. And you know, I did think about that at the very beginning of the podcast, and I thought we should definitely have thumbnails that engage our viewer and attract people to want to watch our videos. Because I know for a fact I watch a lot of YouTube. I've watched YouTube since I was a kid. I am only drawn to the most, like, you know, snazzy looking thumbnails. And to be completely honest, I was like, okay, I acknowledge that I think this should be a thing. But at that time, like we talked about, like, I wasn't doing, my responsibility level myself was personally just showing up, recording with you, leaving, and doing any of the photo editing that needed to be done afterwards and any of the Instagram postings that needed to be done. Because you had such a high responsibility at that time for doing everything else, video, audio, and upload-wise, I didn't want to put that extra responsibility on you to do the thumbnails because I didn't know how to do that.
But now that you take like a much bigger like responsibility, like I'll be honest, like right now, like for me, in my eyes, I see it more of a 60 to 40%.
Which I have no problem with, and I really enjoy. I love the editing, and that it works for
us. But like, I feel like that's where I'm like, all right, I got to step up my game. Like, figure out like our SEOs. That's also important. Like figuring out the SEOs. I'm always calling you up and saying, hey, I think for our next video, we need to do this. Like, we can talk about our topic, but I think we need to do this because it works better and I want to try it out. So like, that's where like, I think I like, after you taking like a lot of the responsibility out of my like actual work for the podcast, it made me figure out like what I can do in research wise to figure out like how we can engage our audiences without changing who we are. Because also the other thing, and we talked about it in a previous episode, or no, not a previous episode, an upcoming episode about trends. Mm-hmm. So that's also important, is that we stay true to what we actually provide here and not like follow something because it's working. Everyone does it. It's more or less we follow what works for us, but stick to what we do best here. And
we curate what works for us around, like, we curate what is going to work for the growth of our bigger vision and what we want. We curate that around the fundamentals of like what we actually want to talk about on this podcast, what rings true to us to talk about, and having the freedom of deciding to stick to what we enjoy and what we feel most passionate about. Because, you know, changing the content for growth is one thing, but kind of just like using the content to your advantage to promote more growth is another. Like, even with the down to the descriptions, you contacting me saying, hey, I need this included in some of the descriptions for SEO purposes and different things like that.
You probably hate me for that. Like, SEO.
I don't. It's necessary.
Every time I'm like, SEO purposes.
Someone has to care about it.
I'm like, SEO purposes, make sure that the description is written in the way where like it leads with the title, because like it reads better like that. But
that's why we grow. That's how we grow.
Absolutely. And before we actually close it off, like the last thing I want to say is that our future for this podcast is like the future that I see that we're going to, or the future that we have like planned in mind, is that we're gonna be filming more. I guess trying new things, as in like I love our podcast settings, but also like we also have talked about experimenting in different ways to make it more interesting for our audiences, in that way we can keep producing more. And not only that, we have a lot more guests that we've already planned out interesting conversation with, so stay tuned for that. But that's all I have to say. What do you have anything else before closing out?
The last thing I would love to say is that, you know, obviously this has been like one of the biggest challenges and leaps out of, I think, both of our comfort zones in doing this. And the fact that like it just shows that it is possible to go into a business with a friend if it's the right person and if you work in the right way with that person. Because yeah, of course we've had conversations and we've had to have things where it's like, okay, like we're not on the same page, you know, let's get on the same page. But it's all about just like whether you both want to try to keep it moving forward, or whether one person is like down to call it quits after a little bit of hardship or struggle. Like we're both in it for the long haul, and I think we've clarified that along the way. And now we're finally getting into a groove, and just as we're getting into a groove, I feel like it's reflecting in all of the engagement and the growth that we've had. And so if anything, I just want to say thank you guys for making it possible for us to work together and still be friends at the end of the day and just like continue to do what we love.
Absolutely. So to all our audiences, I want to thank you for watching, and I want to thank you for making this possible for us.
Yep.
And with that being said, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And if you like this episode a lot, you can hit the subscribe button and the bell notification, because the growth does really matter for us as well. And as well as our social media proofs, Instagram, Twitter, and the Facebook. And as well as, since this is the 30th episode, we do have 29 episodes beforehand that you can actually watch, one on Kiera's face and one on my face. And with that being said, let's just keep going.
Yeah.
Keep growing.
I love to see the growth, and thank you for coming on this ride with us.
Absolutely. Comment down below as well. But other than that, thank you, and we'll see you all next time.
Yep. See you in the next episode.
Bye-bye for now.
See you. Yay. Good to go.